All right. I've been looking forward to this. Kevin Koharki, welcome to the Leaders Who Care series.
No, thanks for having me, Mark. It's a pleasure to be here.
So we're going to do a little, which is the show me state? Is that Kansas or Missouri?
Missouri. Yeah.
You're going to play Missouri here and show them that you really are a leader who cares out there, and by different definitions maybe. But welcome, and let's start with nothing unusual. If you could share a little bit about Kevin. However, and I always have to tell this more to men. Men usually say when I ask them what about them or what are they most interesting about them, they give me their title and their work thing. We'll get to the work in a minute, but can you tell me where you're originally from, where you are now, family, as much as you want to share on that, maybe something you've never told anybody you want to reveal to the world now. That's always kind of interesting, and stuff like that.
So yeah, no, absolutely. So originally from Central New Jersey, for those people who know that there is one, that is not the Jersey Shore or South Jersey or anything like that, and it's not where The Sopranos were filmed. It's in the middle. So lived there until I was 18, and then went to college, did all my degrees at Penn State. Kind of been up and down the eastern seaboard, a lot of Florida, and then back to Pennsylvania. Lived in Missouri for a little while. That's why I know what the Show Me State is because I lived in it. Um, and now I'm in Lafayette, Indiana, and currently looking out of my window at my 2 acres in the woods. So can't complain.
Very
Um,
nice, very nice.
for family's kind of scattered. So my sister up until 2 weeks ago was in Florida. Now she's by Atlanta, and my parents are in central New Jersey. My in-laws are, or sorry, central Pennsylvania, and my in-laws are actually in South Jersey, right by Philadelphia.
Cool. Where in Florida was your sister?
So yeah, so she was, let's see, she was Port St. Lucie, but we first moved there, her and I together, right after I graduated college. So we were in Tampa for a little while, Miami. Then I lived in Naples. I actually even did a little bit in Key Largo,
Wow.
which was pretty cool. Yeah, and then she was Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Port St. Lucie, and then now Atlanta. So
Nice. No, the reason I ask is I was like 22 years in South Florida and know
yeah,
Florida pretty well and stuff. And I don't you miss humidity, but it's a great place to live. Port St. Lucie is beautiful,
it
um,
is. Yeah.
and stuff. So are you a sports fan?
Yeah, so was always a huge football fan. So grew up a New York Giants fan, grew up a New York Yankees fan, which I know is going to aggravate a lot of people. But then when I moved to St. Louis, it was I mean incredibly easy to become a Cardinals fan. It's not like I stopped being a Yankee fan, but I guess I didn't have a National League team. And I remember the first game my wife and I went to, it was against the Pirates. It was a Friday night, and it was like the seventh inning. And I turned to my wife at one point and I said, "You know what I haven't heard the whole time I've been here?" And she said, "What?" I said, "I haven't heard a swear word." I said this stadium feels like it's like a AAA ballpark in that it's a very family atmosphere, and it's a cool place to see a game. I saw a lot of Cardinals games and I enjoyed every one of them, even though they weren't that good when I was there. But
Yeah, well, St. Louis does have, even the Cardinals do have that rep, if you will, that good branding of being, you know, heartful or whatever you
yeah,
want to call it, type of thing,
yep,
like a good place to grow up. I know one of my favorite players in the Panthers, Kachuk, grew up in St. Louis. Now he
yeah.
doesn't kind of qualify for that type of thing, the way he plays anyway, as a guy he is. But no, really cool. With respect to that, so you're married, it sounds like.
Yes.
Do you have kids?
No, we don't. We decided early on we didn't want them. I work all the time. My wife works all the time. She loves her career as a consultant, and so it's just us apparently. So apparently we're dinks. We're double income and no kids. So people hate us.
Oh, that's dinks. It's just why are we so enamored, or maybe we feel it helps us judge people by giving categories all the time. We have to,
Constantly.
or even startups. The worst thing a guy looking for investment hears is, "Well, you're just like so and so as your company." We say, "No, we're not just like so and so." It's
Right.
it's crazy. Well, do you have a dog?
No, so my wife she would have a German Shepherd, which I'm okay with. It's just that every once in a while we'll escape to Switzerland for like 2 weeks, and then it's like, well, what do we do with the pets? And
Well, if you got a
I
Saint
mean, like
Bernard, if you got a Saint Bernard, they know how to ski.
this is true. And so it's just with that, and we don't want to have to clean that often. And So we're
No.
just we're lazy. Now the beauty part is we have like a family of deer. There's literally a family of 14 turkeys that walk through the yard. There's a fox. So we have pets. We just don't have to feed them or anything.
Yeah, I know the feeling. 'Cause I travel a lot too, and I'd love to have a dog again, but it's really hard to do.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't mind seeing deer. Like I've seen it in Canada. I wouldn't mind seeing deer walking by here. But
Oh,
we
we
do have dolphins nearby and sea lions that
yeah.
ocean here. So that's pretty
It's
good.
pretty cool. Now we had just earlier this week there was a fawn with her mother,
Wow.
and I mean this thing was tiny. This thing it couldn't have been more than a day or two old. It was cute. It was cute.
Oh, that's the moments to cherish, right? All the real good
Yeah.
stuff like that is super cool. Were you into nature as a kid? What were you like as a kid and a teenager?
Oh boy. So I was a big weightlifter. I that's all I did. I was too big when I was a kid to play Pop Warner football. So when I was 10, I had to play with the 12 and 13-year-olds, which I got killed. So I didn't play again until I was 14, a freshman in high school.
So that you were
Um,
too big to play with the other guys, but you were okay to play against the big guys.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And the problem is I still had a 10-year-old's like mindset. So I wasn't an angry player or anything like that. That came later. So I just got killed out there. And the kids like really enjoyed it.
Nice.
So yeah, I grew up playing sports and all that fun stuff, baseball, football, basketball. No hockey, which I actually just finished a call where I regret that just because it really is the best sport to watch live, in my opinion. It's fantastic. Um, but did a lot of fishing with my father and my uncle, on my dad's brother. We were all very close, and so just kind of grew up outdoors, cutting wood, fishing, stuff like that. So I've always actually enjoyed the reason I have 2 acres of wooded property is because my uncle had a wooded property, and I always wanted it. And so when we moved here in 2018, it was the first house we saw, and we saw like 15 others. But my wife knew as soon as I saw this one, I was done.
Yeah, you get that. It's a great feeling when you get that. And I want to actually bring it back up in a few minutes when we talk, but like you just said, we were outside all the time. We were doing this, we were doing that. What a difference a day makes with
Hmm.
what's happening now. But we'll get into that a little bit. Education wise, like you mentioned, you're a through and through Penn State person, obviously, because you did the bachelor's in accounting, then later on your MBA in finance, and then you're extra smart and a doctor with your PhD. Um, what were you envisioning early on, first of all, in accounting, and then even the rest of that education? Where were you going?
Yeah, so when I did my undergrad in accounting, I did not want to be a CPA or anything like that. There's nothing wrong with that. I train obviously hundreds of them a year now, but as a professor. But when I was 17, 18 years old, I read Peter Lynch's One Up on Wall Street. He was a legendary fund manager at Fidelity. I fell in love with stock picking. That was like getting hit with a lightning bolt. That led me to Warren Buffett, which he said, if you want to be an investor, you need to know accounting. And keep in mind, this is the year 2000. So the dot-com bubble is just starting to burst. All the fraud is starting to be exposed.
Yeah.
And I quickly realized, yeah, I really should know accounting. So I went to Penn State to be an accounting major strictly to understand that language because it is a pet peeve of mine. So I promise I won't get on my soapbox. But I'm always amazed with how many finance people have no idea how the financial statements were constructed and struggle to read them. So I always tell people it's like reading a book without knowing the language. And then
Yeah,
the accounting
I want to talk to you about that actually. So we'll get into that. So that's by the way, I am a CPA, and I didn't want to be. I did it mostly so I'd have a foundation in business and stuff. So that's why I did it as well. But I didn't go for my MBA. I was still t exhausted of studying for my CPA and stuff. Did you have did you have business in mind when you went for your MBA and then even your PhD, or what was?
No, so by the time, so I graduated '04. I did mergers and acquisitions work as an analyst. So studied a lot of companies for Morgan Stanley and then a private company. So when I went back for my MBA and my PhD, I knew I was getting into the professor world.
Hmm.
So the funny story about it was I kind of knew that I needed a little bit more education. So I wanted to get an MBA, did that, went to the PhD, and then just became a professor. So I didn't plan on coming back to the business world. That happened by accident years later, and now I absolutely love it. So
Now you're still
it,
teaching though, right?
I am, yeah. So I teach all graduate level, and I specialize in financial statement analysis, which was like the course I was always, I think, meant to teach, so to speak.
Well, that's good. So I'm going to try to segue here. Our firm actually was launched on the premise that leaders and their businesses can do way better when they're doing good, type
Mhm.
of thing. And doing good can mean a whole bunch of different things, including helping people to
Yep.
be better people. You kind of stated why you wanted to become a professor in accounting. Um, what did you what did you what did you feel? It's not like teaching about biology, if you will. You're teaching accounting. What
Mhm.
turned you on about doing that? And how did you teach in a certain way that the students were not just learning accounting per se?
Yeah, I mean, I always thought so. So when I still taught traditional accounting, you got to do the debits and credits, the fundamentals. But to me, it was always important to show them how it's applied, right? Because it's like, guys, look, fine, you know how to do lease accounting or pension accounting, good for you. Why does it matter? Who's using the financial statements and what information are they looking to get out of this? And being an investor for 25 years in public companies and whatnot, that was always my thing. So to me, it was like, look, I'll show you the accounting, but we're going to talk about who's using this and why your role is important. And
Hmm.
that's kind of become a mantra for my life, basically, is let me show you why what you do matters, why it adds value, and that's where people find their purpose, basically. But so
No, I think it's great because otherwise, and we had distinct differences and opinions of the different accounting teachers. In fact, I remember even in high school, there was Mr. Ferguson and Mr. Stewart. They both taught biology. Mr. Stewart was a genius,
mhm,
um, and Mr. Stewart was a genius, and Mr. Ferguson taught us like you did what's great about biology type of thing and
yeah,
why.
yep,
And even if we weren't interested in science, we were interested. And
yeah.
you got to be better at that, even in accounting.
It shows up in my evals quite a bit. Where they just say like we love the stories, we love learning why this is relevant. And it's like, I don't know. I think it's because I grew up with a family that everybody worked at Johnson and Johnson. It was a great company, but in a lot of ways they didn't understand why their roles mattered. And so my uncle, being in HR, he was high up in human resources. He always complained about that. So I guess just from osmosis, so to speak, it was that influenced my teaching to where it's like, well, I'm going to show you guys why this counts.
See, I love that because I went into it not because I loved accounting. I was good at it. I was good at tax. I was good at all that stuff. But one partner at Deloitte, which how it came, one of the reasons among many, one of the leaders who cared about me and I saw about other people, um, took me out of all that and put me more into discussing business with the clients and relationships with the clients and why are they doing this? And I got into trouble early on because the partner was pissed that I was talking to the client versus them. But
Yep.
um, but that's kind of why I'm asking you because um, it impacts so many things about a business and their client and how how they're interacting with each other, how to get better customers, how to attract the best talent, everything there because you actually have some purpose, as you said, you're making a difference. I want to ask you really quick along that though, why did you pick what happened that you got Washington and Purdue versus Penn State?
So it's yeah. So I mean, I did all my degrees at Penn State, and it's when you come from a PhD, they don't hire It's custom that you don't hire your own. You let
Right.
them go out and go somewhere else and take what they've learned, right? For lack of a better phrase, this isn't how they actually say it, but the Penn State way or whoever it is, and you go somewhere else. Now you can come back, but you have to like really go out there and prove yourself, and you got to want to come back and all this other stuff.
No, that's cool.
So I was fortunate that my initial placement was at a top 20 university. It was Washington University in St. Louis, and I loved my 4 years there. It was great. I had great colleagues. But then Purdue called in 2018 and said, "We'll give you tenure." And I said, "Okay." So That was enough.
How long before you said okay?
It didn't take it maybe a day because I knew WashU, they have a very long tenure clock. It's a higher bar, and I didn't want to take the risk of waiting because a lot of times when you get these tenure offers, the window opens and it might not be open 2 years later. So you got to balance your career a little bit that way.
Kind of reminds me of a college football star that has to decide to leave early or not in case they get injured or not. Type
Yeah,
different, but same maybe same thinking
it's
about.
same, yeah, very very similar. Because I'll tell you, I've seen enough people where they've kind of stretched it out with certain schools, and then before you know it, it's like, well, we don't need a tax person anymore, or we don't need a financial statement analyst, and it's just like, well, that's it. Then you're not going there.
Yeah, and sometimes even matters with a company that gets a great offer. I think of Groupon from Google and doesn't take the offer.
Yeah, yeah,
And it's a
and
decision. You can't say they're wrong at the time because no one really knows, but it is yeah, it's part of that decision, which kind of leads me to what I'm super excited about is what you do at CAE Consulting.
yep.
And why I'm talking about how you teach differently and how you do this differently and that differently. And I like leaders who care about being different type of
Hmm.
thing, not to be cute. So first of all, the name. Tell us about the name, and then, well, first of all, tell us about the name, and I'll get into the next part.
Sure. So CA Consulting, it's just an acronym. It stands for Capital Allocation Enhancement. And the reason I chose that name was because in 1987, in the Berkshire Hathaway annual letter to shareholders, it was the first time that Warren Buffett said that a CEO's number one responsibility is to allocate capital. And when I read that really clicked, and I thought, okay, I get what he's saying. I understand how he's thinking as an investor. I didn't want to say capital allocation enhancement consulting. That's long. So I figured, let me just shorten it. And then it's always a nice conversation starter because I give somebody a business card and they say, "What does that mean?" And then you just go into it.
So
I
you're
guess,
like
I guess pitch.
you're like KFC.
Yeah, exactly. It means something else. Sometimes I get people to say, "What is CAE Consulting?" And that even confuses me. I'm like, "What is that?" And it's like, "Oh, wait a minute, that's me."
Yeah, I never would have thought that, but I mean, I guess somebody could have a thing. No, it's interesting. Capital allocation.
Enhancement. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember MB? Is it yeah, MBO, Management by Objectives?
Mhm.
Tell me if it's a little bit. Here we go with. Oh, you're just like. If it's a little bit similar to Management by Objectives was the thing about basically tell me what you totally absolutely need to do what you need to do. And if there's any extra we got, you might get it. Why would you do that? But prove the budget that you need for what you need to do.
I mean, it's similar. I mean, to me, I think it's a little broader on my end, just because what I'm really trying to do is help companies change their culture a little bit. Because a lot of people think that it's just, well, we do this task, we do that task, and it's like, well, yeah, okay, guys, that's the product that you sell. But what you're really doing by doing this is taking a dollar and investing it and hoping to get more than a dollar in the future. And so you're allocating capital to do that. Now, every business is trying to do that, just in different ways. But believe me when I tell you, as an investor, that if I find a CEO who doesn't understand that right away, as an investor, I'm no longer investing because they need to understand that as job number one. Unless Warren Buffett's wrong, I'm not going to make that argument.
He's got a fairly good record.
A little bit, yeah, he's done okay.
So do you, and I want to get into something else in a minute with related to this, but do you look at like use of funds immediately or how do you play that?
Exactly. So what I'm looking to do is I'm looking to see, okay, from the money that they're making from, generating their revenue from whatever it is they sell, product, services, whatever, how well do they then take that money and reinvest it back into the business, and in by doing what? So one of my favorite examples is a company. It was one of my first investments. It's called Chico's. They're a retailer. And I made 7 times my money in 5 years in this company. And their founder really understood what they were doing, because what works in Miami and retail, generally speaking, is going to work in Houston. It'll work in New York. It'll work in Seattle, right? I mean, that's the chain concept. So when I see a company that was doing really well outside of Fort Myers, Florida, where it was basically from, Sanibel Island, I think.
Mm.
And you realize, wow, every time they open a store, the cash on cash return is 30%. You start multiplying that out across the country and you realize this is a great capital allocation story. Because you have something people want, right? Otherwise, it's, well, why don't they go into another business that is okay? And then, it's like, yeah, but then we're just making average return on our invested capital. It's a lousy business. And so it's very hard to find businesses that are good at this. You need a competitive advantage, a smart management team, all that stuff. So it's a challenge, and that's what I'm trying to help companies with is understand that from a cultural perspective.
Now, do you work with startups to 500s to whatever? Or-
Yeah, so I got lucky in that my first client is still my client, my one of my largest clients, a Fortune 100 firm. They do 80 billion a year in revenue. So I work companies that size, literally all the way down to mom and pops. Last August, I stayed in the guest house of a rich husband and wife, um, who had started a security business, had no idea how to read the financial statements or anything. And they said, "Hey, come out for 4 days. You'll stay by yourself in the guest house. We've never used it. It has furniture, fortunately, and you'll train us." And so it really runs the gamut from a company of any size.
Well, it's yeah, it's I can relate because having been in leadership development and then executive search for so long, I worked with all the big companies. However, the most fun, the ones that the really great candidates want to go to are the funded startups, the growing companies where they can really make an impact and be involved in
Yep.
the business. And it's
Yep.
fascinating because there's a lot of corporate guys and gals that say, "Oh, I'd love to join a startup. It sounds so exciting, and I know I can do it," and they have no clue, basically, of
Right.
everything they have to do and
Yep.
stuff like that, from culture to everything. Which leads me to I like when you describe business because this is right up my alley because I compare business and life to sports all the time.
Hmm.
You talk about business as a team sport. And you're talking about
Yep.
using the language of business. So share about that. Great stuff. I love that.
So the way I think about it as a football guy is, imagine if it was only your quarterback who knew the playbook, right? So playbooks are another language. If you've ever listened to videotape from inside the huddle, it sounds like they're just throwing out random words, but it's a language. So if only the quarterback knows the language, the linemen don't know who to block on any given play, the receivers don't know what routes to run, and trust breaks down because the quarterback doesn't know if his left tackle is going to cover his blind side, so to speak. He doesn't know if the receivers are going to be right where they need to be when he gets the ball to them, and vice versa. That they don't trust the quarterback because they don't know what he's saying. That offense is not going anywhere. So I apply that to business as well. It's the same thing. So to me, I always look at these organizations and think, your CEO has these objectives to allocate capital, grow the business, and do all these things, but the corporations don't do a good job distilling that down to the rest of the organization. And the failure really is just failing to develop the employees' financial acumen. So they're speaking the CEO's language. The CEO knows that they understand the language and how their role impacts his or her objectives. And it's just like the quarterback on the football team, right? You got to make sure everybody knows the playbook. And when you do that, and I've been doing this for several years now, I can't tell you how many times I get people to tell me, I'm an engineer or I'm an ops person or whatever it is. I never knew this is the impact my job really has. And they immediately change how they view their day to day work in a good way. And so to me, when you develop this language throughout the organization, you get mutual trust flowing up and down the organization that allows you to align on a common purpose. And that's how you solidify a culture.
Yeah, I love that. I remember years ago, before all these conversations happened, I had Bell Canada and Northern Telecom, now Nortel, as clients, and I was sitting in the boardroom where the auditors usually sat in my first year, maybe not even 6 months, and I'd just been on an inventory for Northern phones and everything, and the CEO came in saying hi to the auditors. How you doing? You said hi to me. Didn't have to, just happened to say hi to me, and I told them, oh yeah, I was just at your factory where all this with the phones and everything, and the people there are amazing. They taught me this and this, and he said, well, actually, I've never been there. And I said, and I used to be very sarcastic at the time. One of the partners there taught me how to be less. And but I told him, man, I should have said, really? You never been there? That's
Mhm.
crazy. But I said something like, it was a great thing.
Yep.
And to his credit, it might have been about 3 weeks later, he came to me and he said, I went there because he told me about it. And we're going to put a couple of those people on our executive committee. And back then, they never even thought of putting them on their executive committee, never mind teaching them the language or their purpose
Yeah.
either.
Yeah.
And they thought that was the right thing to do. And so I love when you talk about it that way because expression we use a lot is clear is kind.
Yeah.
And you know, the most unkind thing you can do is not tell people that they're doing great and have purpose and what the language is. So
Hmm.
really, really fantastic. Can you, if you're taking on a new client, then can you describe how do you where do you start to tell them how to use the capital effectively and 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 how it does, benefit them as well as the company?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll give you an example using engineers just because I've trained God probably thousands of them at this point. Um, to an engineer, if something is technically correct, we should do it. Right? If we're building a jet engine or whatever it is, if something is technically correct, it's scientifically correct, we could do it, or we should do it. And then finance looks at it and says, yeah, but we're not going to make a good return on this investment. So the $50 million you're asking for, you got to make a better case. And the engineer just gets frustrated because the engineer was hired for his or her expertise. They're really smart. They know science and all that. Fine. Then when I come in and I start to walk them through their company, because it's always tailored, everything's customized, because to me, that's one of the differentiators. And as an investment, I get to learn about a new business. So why not? It's kind of a triple win there, if you will. And once the engineer understands the financial language, but also the goals of the organization, and then how they fit into that, they realize, yeah, that project probably wasn't the best one to pursue. But if we did it this way, then we can make the numbers work and we can move forward with what we're trying to accomplish. And so, because engineers, it's math, it's science. They're used to dealing in a world of constraints. Well, finance is also constraints. We either have the money or we don't. And so once you put that in the proper context for them, they realize, oh, okay, now I know why you need me to do what I do, and why you need me to do it better. So the most fun I have with this is when I show the engineers, guys, do you know why your stock price matters? And they say, no, we don't care about that. And I said, well, let me put it to you this way. If your stock price goes down too far, the internal return that I need you to get as your CFO on the projects that you're bringing to me goes up because your stock price went down. Now the market thinks we're riskier as a company. And so I need you to go out and get an even bigger return on the capital that you're asking for. And as soon as they see it that way, they say, "Oh," and I say, "So now guys, do you understand why I need you to do it this way?" And they say, "Yep, you're actually making us more efficient, which will ensure that that cost of capital stays low." Right. And so it's just like a high jumper. A high jumper doesn't want to have to go over a whatever, an 8 foot bar when they can win the championship on a 6 foot jump. Right. So that's what we're doing. I'm trying to keep that hurdle as low as possible and showing them how they help the company do that.
Yeah, I think it's great if you compare it to a sports team again. If this is what it takes to win a championship, everybody just has to know what it takes to win a championship,
Exactly.
and or you're not going to win it. Or we have to get more money to invest in Joe, who could come over here and help us get to that, to that point. So, super exciting. A couple of quick last questions.
Mhm.
Because I'm in LA, and LA, we always say that you have to keep them wanting more so you can do a sequel. So we might have to do that or something. But they say the fourth industrial revolution is about tech, which is AI and
Mhm.
tech and everything right now. And the fifth, however, is about humanity. And now the question is, okay, AI and humanity, you got a lot of conversation
Mhm.
going on there. It's a longer discussion, but what's been your perception of what's going on and how it impacts what you're talking about with AI and potential layoffs and potential upskilling and potential a lot of things and entrepreneurs, a lot of them, like you say, a lot of entrepreneurs are great at what they do, and the smart ones know what they don't do and get the right talent in to help them. But it's happening so fast with AI, it's hard.
So take it from this neophyte's perspective on all things AI. So I'm good friends with a gentleman who used to run the U.S. Air Force test pilot program. So I mean, think of uh, Top Gun, stuff like that. And I mean, this guy is incredibly smart, and he is working a lot with AI, particularly around just fighter pilots and stuff like that. And so I was talking to him earlier in the week, and I asked him, I said, where do you see this going? Do you think it's going to displace a lot of jobs, blah, blah, blah? And he goes, think of it this way. He goes, let's just say you buy a Black& and Decker drill or a Ryobi drill, and you want to build a deck. And he goes, and you just put the drill out there and you just stare at it. And he goes, you're going to be waiting a long time, to get that deck complete. He said, well, it works like that in everything. The point is, the AI is good, and it's going to definitely change how some jobs are done. But he said, when you look at, can AI beat a human? Yeah, probably in most things. But can a human using AI beat AI by itself? Yep. And so, just like the drill doesn't build the deck. It needs the person to use the drill to build the deck. This is the same thing. So I know people are worried about it and all this other stuff, but all the folks that I talk to across God knows how many industries at this point, they all say the same thing. This is a tool that we're going to use to make humans better. We're going to take the bot out of the human being, which I think is pretty awesome because a lot of people don't want to sit around and do boring, mindless tasks. They want to do something that gets them to think and gets them to contribute at a higher level.
Yeah, I totally agree. I actually think AI is going to be the technology that finally allows people to be happier, and get what tech was supposed to do in the first place. By the way, the your accounting students might get impacted significantly by AI as well, but that would hopefully mean they can maybe do more strategic thinking and imagination and stuff like that.
We at Purdue ran into this 6 years ago, and we did a lot of work on this, like me and three other people. And we talked to everybody under the sun we could find in various industries and the big accounting firms and all that. And they all said the same thing. All this is doing is giving us more products and services to offer our clients, which means we need more people. It's actually what we saw in the 80s. The computer came out and everyone thought accountant jobs were going to go away. Now there's more accountants today than there ever have been by far, whether you want to do that on a percentage basis or whatever. So it actually required more people.
Yeah, and it'll have to really upskill a lot of people though. There's going to be a lot of things that are going to be different than what it was there. But if it's done properly, and it's a longer discussion, there's conversations we've had with executives about people that have been laid off and there's no other thing for them to do, is
Mhm.
maybe take on being leaders who care about the community. And this is where it gets into judgment about universal income. And so all that stuff is, and keep them on to do things in the community for the company,
Yeah,
that would brand them really well. And communities need so many people to do so many things. So it's an interesting discussion about how maybe people can be happier, even if they're even retirement age now, and do stuff in the community. So that'll be
right.
the next conversation we have. But my last question on this part is, in 2021, a client told me he described 2020, the pandemic year, as the year that flew by slowly. And I thought it was great. And
Yeah.
it seems like yesterday, and it seems like 5 years ago, as it is at the same time, in a weird way. And we're already almost last half of 2025. So with all that said, what are you most grateful for, and what are you most hopeful for?
What I'm most grateful for, honestly, I can't say it enough, even though I know it sounds cliched, but I mean, honestly, it's my wife. Um,
That's not
she's
cliche.
I was fortunate in that I married the smartest woman I ever met, and she keeps me grounded. I don't want to say she keeps me honest because I'm honest, like I'm not like trying to lie to people, but you know what I mean by that
Yeah,
phrase. She keeps me grounded, but she also supports me 100% in all the stuff that I'm doing, in ways that I didn't really think were, I guess, necessary, somewhat possible. So definitely mostly grateful for her. And I think it was, what am I most optimistic about?
we're hopeful. Yeah.
Hopeful. I mean, on the selfish side, I am really gung ho and hopeful about about my business personally. It's been growing really well. I absolutely love what I do with the consulting side and stuff like that. And so being able to be out there and help people kind of understand the why, as I call it, behind their role, why they're important to the organization, why they do it matters, that gives me a lot of hope because when you see adults, right, 40, sometimes 50, 60 years old, get that spark and they say, wow, man, I never thought of it this way. This is so cool. That's kind of like a drug.
It is. It,
So
no,
I'm hoping to your point, it just feeds into the whole leaders who care mantra, because I think that's where in a lot of ways we need to go.
won't get an argument from me. I see it all the time. Well, I'm grateful to have a new friend. I'll tell you that, and
Yes, sir.
and that you are a leader who cares, and that's what probably makes me most hopeful too. Is that I think like you, there's so many more leaders who care out there that we haven't talked about enough, and
Yeah.
show that it actually is good for business. It doesn't just mean you hug leaders who care. It means you care about making money and making an impact at the same time, and all that's good. So keep making a difference, and thanks for being on the series.
No, I really appreciate it, Mark. Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.